也有可能等一段时间才能配上。
它配上了，这个几率呢是。
The probability of matching a donor with a specific recipient is very low. Let me give you an example. Between siblings, the probability of matching one donor with a sibling is as low as 25%. Matching a donor with a recipient who is not a blood relative varies. In China, the lowest probability reported is 1.2%. In other words, there is over a 90% probability that it won't match. In the United States, the lowest probability reported is about 5 to 6%.
If you go on the list, the chances of your getting a perfect match are not great. This does not happen often in a way for any individual patient that goes on the list. But we do have a priority of matching in this country. So the donor antigens, the donor markers are identified. And then we try and find a recipient that matches that donor, whether it be here in New England or in some other part of the country.
Normally, there is a vast number of people in need of organs, but there is a very small number of donors. The supply of organs is always much lower than the demand. This is a typical situation for organ transplant matching. However, there are now reports that a foreigner can find a matching organ in mainland China in less than 2 weeks. This is quite perplexing. If there is only one organ available in China, there is over a 90% chance that the foreigner will not be able to match with the donor's organ. Now, the organ transplant matching in China is what I call reverse organ transplant matching. What happens now is that a person can travel to China and have a blood and tissue check. Next, the hospital will quickly find a matching donor. This means there must be an extremely large human organ bank in China. This is a most unusual situation. In the United States or other countries, there is never such a large human organ bank. It is not unusual for a patient to wait 2, 3, or even 8 years for a matching organ.
I don't know how one guarantees. There's no other way of guaranteeing the opportunity of having an organ available on a scheduled basis other than to say we'll have to schedule an execution. So the comment that you make that these websites exist guaranteeing that an organ will be available is alarming to me, and immediately back to the issue that we brought to attention just a moment ago, and that is, how does one make a guarantee other than saying we're going to have a quota of so many executions necessary to allow for these guarantees?
In the subsequent investigation, we discovered that these hospitals in Shenyang City have an ample and stable supply of organs. Moreover, they use only organs from living human beings. In the FAQ section of SITNAC, we discovered a shocking answer to a question.
Are the organs for the pancreas transplant from brain-dead patients?
Our organs do not come from brain-dead victims because the state of the organ may not be good.
On its Chinese website, there is another abominable answer to a question.
Is it possible to be infected with diseases like HIV or hepatitis after the kidney's been transplanted?
It is not necessary to worry about that. The biggest problem with a kidney transplantation is the tissue match. Before the living kidney transplantation, we will examine the donor's renal functions and leukocytes in order to assure the safety of the kidney. So it is more safe and reliable here than in other countries, where the organ is not from a living donor.
In a living kidney transplant, a kidney must be transferred from the donor to the recipient within 24 hours. According to our investigation, most investigated hospitals transfer the kidneys from living donors within 10 hours. This is a clear indication that the source of the kidneys are very conveniently available to the hospitals.
A report by Hua Sheng newspaper on December 24, 2004, quoted Assistant Professor Wu Gang from the Chinese Medical College's affiliated organ transplant center, quote, "There is more than an ample supply of kidneys in Shenyang City. Therefore, people who try to sell their kidneys can hardly find any buyers, despite their advertisements," end quote. Let's clarify one thing first. Chinese law prohibits human organ trading. With this in mind, how can hospitals in Shenyang City possibly have such an ample supply of organs, while all of China has a severe shortage of donors? Where on earth do these hospitals in Shenyang get their human organs? To answer this question, we need to consider the traditional sources of these human organs available to transplant centers in China.
There are mainly three types of sources. First, living donors from a patient's own family. Take kidney transplantation as an example. Living kidney transplants represent a very small portion of kidney transplants in China. The Beijing Modern Commercial News published an article on June 10, 2004 entitled, "Organ Transplantation, Is It Moving Forward or Backward?" It reveals a statistic. Only 1.5% of the kidneys that are transplanted in China came from patients' families or relatives. The second source of organs comes from people who die accidentally and who donated their organs beforehand. In China, there is not yet any law for brain death. In addition, there is no nationwide organ donation registration system. Owing to traditional concepts of being buried with every organ and body part intact, the Chinese people are more reluctant to donate their organs. These are all the reasons that contribute to the fact that there has been a very small number of willing organ donors in China. There is a Chinese newspaper called Chutian City Paper. On March 29, 2005, it published the very first case of a brain death patient whose organs were used in a transplant. In other words, no organ transplant had used organs from brain-dead patients before that time. The third source comes from executed death row prisoners. China may be the only country in the world that does this. The Chinese Communist Party has been denying it for a very long time. Finance magazine revealed sales of organs from executed prisoners. At the World Health Organization's Manila branch meeting held from November 7th to 9th, 2005, Deputy Minister of China's Health Ministry Huang Jiefu admitted for the first time that the majority of organ transplants in China use organs from death row prisoners.